When you hear the word Spanish Inquisition, what pops into your head? For most of us, it's probably images of shadowy figures, dark dungeons, and instruments of unimaginable cruelty. It's a picture painted by centuries of stories, books, and movies. But what if I told you that behind the popular image of random, brutal chaos, there was something far more calculated? What if the Inquisition wasn't just about punishment, but about the masterful, strategic use of fear itself? Let's travel back to late 15th century Spain. The country had just been unified under Queen Isabella I of Castile and King Ferdinand II of Aragon. Their goal was to create a single, powerful, Catholic kingdom, but there was a problem in their eyes. The presence of conversos Jews who had converted to Christianity, often under immense pressure. There was widespread suspicion that many of these conversos were practicing their old faith in secret. This was the spark that ignited the Spanish Inquisition in 1478. Its official mission, to root out heresy and ensure religious purity. But its unofficial mission was to consolidate power and create a society governed by fear. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The Inquisition's power didn't just come from its ability to torture and execute. It came from its psychological warfare. The process began not with a bang, but with a whisper. When inquisitors arrived in a town, they would announce an edict of grace. This was a grace period, usually 30 to 40 days, during which people could confess their heretical sins without facing severe punishment. Sounds reasonable, right? But it was a brilliant psychological trap. Was your friend, your business partner, or even your own family members secretly practicing forbidden rituals? Would they denounce you to save themselves? The social fabric of communities began to tear apart. Trust evaporated, replaced by a constant, gnawing suspicion. This was the first layer of fear. The fear of your own community. If you were accused, the real ordeal began. Arrests often happened suddenly, without warning. Sometimes, in the dead of night, you'd be taken away, and your property would be confiscated immediately. Your family would be left with nothing, and often they wouldn't even know where you were or what you were accused of. The legal process was designed for maximum terror. You were considered guilty until proven innocent. You weren't told who accused you, and you weren't allowed a proper legal defense. The entire system was shrouded in secrecy, and this uncertainty was a powerful tool. The fear of the unknown is often more potent than the fear of the known. And then there was the infamous interrogation. While torture was indeed used, it wasn't a constant frenzy of violence like some movies portray. It was applied strategically. The mere threat of torture was often enough to break someone. The sight of the instruments, the detailed explanation of what they would do to your body, this was all part of the psychological pressure. The goal wasn't just to inflict pain, but to create a state of absolute despair and helplessness, where confession seemed like the only way out. The final act of this theater of fear was the auto de fe, or act of faith. This was a massive public ceremony where the condemned were paraded through the streets and their sentences were read aloud. It was a spectacle designed to be seen by everyone. Some would be reconciled with the church, wearing penitential garments. Others, the unrepentant, would be handed over to the secular authorities to be burned at the stake. This wasn't done in a dark cellar. It was a public festival of punishment. It was a clear, terrifying message to the entire population. This is what happens to those who defy the faith and the state. It was a demonstration of absolute power, leaving an indelible mark on the collective psyche. So, the Spanish Inquisition was far more than just random brutality. It was a highly organized system that weaponized fear at every level, from the initial suspicion sown within communities to the secretive and terrifying legal process, and finally, to the grand public spectacle of punishment. It was a chillingly effective mechanism of social and political control, built on the understanding that the fear you can't see is the most powerful of all. It reminds us that the most terrifying institutions in history are often not the chaotic ones, but the ones that are. Have you ever wondered why historical accounts of the Inquisition are so filled with stories of torture? It wasn't just random cruelty. Pain as a path to truth. Let's step back in time. It was the framework for reality itself. Heresy, the act of deviating from established religious doctrine, wasn't just a difference of opinion. a cancer that could corrupt the soul of the individual and threaten the very fabric of Christian society. For the Church, stamping out heresy wasn't just a matter of control. They believed it was a sacred duty to save souls, both the heretics and the communities. This is where the concept of truth gets complicated. For us, truth is something we discover through evidence, facts, and logical deduction. In their worldview, the body and the soul were deeply connected. Physical pain, they resoned, could act as a purifying fire. It was a way to break the devil's hold on the accused. It's a chilling thought, but they saw it as a spiritual battle being fought on the physical plane. The screams in the torture chamber were, to them, "We know that people will say anything to make the pain stop." But for the Inquisition, the confession was everything. It was a public act of repentance. The confession was the proof that the soul had been cleansed. Physical evidence, like heretical books or testimony from witnesses, was useful for bringing a charge. Therefore, getting them to confess, to speak the truth with their own mouth, was the ultimate goal. It validated the entire process. Of course, the methods they used were horrific. The psychological pressure was just as intense. The accused was isolated, interrogated for hours, and shown the instruments of torture before they were even used. The entire system was designed to break a person's will. Well, it certainly produced confessions. Thousands upon thousands of them. It's highly unlikely. Under that kind of agony and terror, most people would confess to anything. The truth the Inquisition found was often just a reflection of their own fears and beliefs. They weren't necessarily all monsters who enjoyed inflicting pain. Many were educated men, theologians who genuinely believed they were doing God's work. They were operating within a logic that, while abhorrent to us, made perfect sense to them. If you found this interesting, please. Ever heard of a punishment so clever it used your own body against you? Today, we're diving into the dark history of a method called Strappado. It's a chilling example of how human ingenuity can be turned towards cruelty. Unlike other brutal methods that relied on fire or sharp objects, Strappado's main tool was something we all experience every single day. Gravity. Imagine this. A person's hands are tied securely behind their back. Then, a rope is attached to their wrists and slung over a beam or a pulley high above. The victim is then slowly hoisted off the ground. As they are lifted, their entire body weight hangs from their arms, which are being pulled backward and upward into an unnatural, agonizing position. The strain is immediate and immense. The primary source of pain comes from the shoulders. As the body hangs, the shoulder joints are forced to bear the full weight. This causes the joints to dislocate, sometimes with a sickening pop that could be heard by onlookers. The muscles and ligaments are stretched to their breaking point, and the nerves are pinched, sending waves of excruciating pain throughout the upper body. Every breath, every slight movement would intensify the suffering. What made Strappado particularly insidious was its psychological impact. The process was often slow. The victim would be raised gradually, feeling the pressure build, anticipating the inevitable dislocation. Sometimes, the executioner would jerk the rope or drop the person a short distance before catching them abruptly, adding a new dimension of horror. This drop, known as disquasation, would use the body's momentum to ensure the shoulders were completely torn from their suck. One of the most disturbing aspects of this punishment was its lack of visible evidence, at least initially. On the outside, there might be no blood, no gaping wounds. All the damage was internal. This made it a favored method for interrogations. A person could be subjected to this torment, confess, and then be presented in court looking relatively unharmed, making their testimony seem more credible. But beneath the surface, they were left with permanent, debilitating injuries. Many who survived Strappado would never regain full use of their arms. The chronic pain and disability would be a constant reminder of their ordeal. Historically, Strappado was used across Europe for centuries. From the medieval period, through the Renaissance, and beyond, it was a common feature of the Inquisition, used to extract confessions from those accused of heresy. Its effectiveness in breaking a person's will, both physically and mentally, made it a terrifyingly popular tool of power and control. It didn't require complex machinery, just a rope, a high point, and a profound disregard for human suffering. Looking back at methods like Strappado isn't about glorifying violence. It's about understanding the darker chapters of our history. It reminds us of the importance of human rights and the legal systems we have in place today to prevent such atrocities. It is a stark lesson in how simple physics can be twisted into a weapon of immense cruelty. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. Have you ever wondered what it would feel like if time itself became your enemy? Not in a metaphorical sense, like you're running late for an appointment, but in a very real, physical way, where every passing second amplifies your suffering. Today, we're going to explore a method of psychological and physical pressure that is as ingenious as it is terrifying. A technique where the true tormento isn't a person, but the relentless march of the clock. Imagine being placed in a position. It's not immediately painful, just awkward. Maybe you're forced to squat, or hold your arms out to the side, or sit on an uneven surface. It's uncomfortable, for sure. But you think, I can handle this. It's not so bad. You might even feel a little defiant. But then, the minutes start to tick by. 5 minutes pass. 10 minutes. The initial discomfort begins to sharpen into a dull, persistent itchy. Your muscles start to protest. First with a tremor, then with a deep, burning sensation. This is the core of what's known as a stress position. It's a method designed to break a person down, not with sudden, intense pain, but with a slow, grinding escalation of agony. The brilliance of this technique lies in its simplicity. There are no complex devices, no overt acts of violence. The only tools required are your own body and time. The position you're in is specifically chosen to be unnatural, forcing your muscles to work against gravity in ways they aren't meant to for extended periods. After half an hour, the dull ache has become a fire. Every muscle fiber screams for relief. Your joints feel like they're being pried apart. You start to sweat, not from heat, but from sheer exertion and pain. Your mind, which was once defiant, now has only one thought. When will this end? This is where the psychological component kicks in with full force. You are acutely aware that you are the source of your own suffering. If you could just move, just shift your weight, the pain would ease, but you can't. Any movement is forbidden. This restriction is crucial. It creates a feeling of complete helplessness. You are trapped inside your own body, a prisoner of your own anatomy. The humiliation starts to set in. Being forced into such a vulnerable, often undignified, posture in front of others strips away your sense of self-respect. You feel reduced, powerless. The fear isn't of a sudden blow, but of the seemingly infinite stretch of time ahead. How much longer can you endure this? An hour? 2? The uncertainty is a torment in itself. As the first hour mark approaches, your body begins to fail. Your muscles cramped violently, sending searing jolts of pain through you. You might start shaking uncontrollably. Your perception of time becomes distorted. Each second feels like a minute, each minute an hour. The room around you might start to blur as your focus narrows to the single, overwhelming sensation of pain. This is a state where cognitive function breaks down. It becomes difficult to think clearly, to hold on to a train of thought, to access memories. Your world shrinks to this one agonizing moment. The long-term effects of this are profound. Physically, it can lead to permanent muscle and nerve damage, joint problems, and circulatory issues. But the psychological scars are often deeper. Survivors frequently speak of a shattered sense of self, chronic anxiety, and a lingering feeling of helplessness. The experience rewrites your relationship with your own body, turning it from a source of strength into a source of betrayal and pain. It is a stark reminder of how fragile our physical and mental resilience can be. When faced with the simple, yet brutal, combination of an awkward position and the inescapable passage of time, it proves that sometimes the most effective forms of pressure don't need to be loud or violent. Welcome back to our channel, where we delve into the darkest corners of history. Today, we're examining a device that wasn't designed for questioning or extracting confessions, but purely for punishment. Imagine an iron collar, cold and heavy, locked around a person's neck. This collar wasn't just for restraint. It was attached to a solid wall by a short, unyielding chain. The purpose was simple yet horrifying: to force the victim to stand. Not for an hour, not for a day, but for days on end. The length of the chain was calculated with cruel precision. It was just long enough to allow standing, but too short to permit sitting or lying down. Any attempt to find relief by slumping or bending would only result in the collar digging deeper into the neck, choking and chafing the skin. Think about the sheer exhaustion after the first few hours. The legs would begin to ache, a deep, burning pain spreading from the feet up to the hips. The back would scream in protest, every muscle spasming from the constant strain of holding the body upright. There was no escape, no moment of respite. The cold, hard reality was the wall in front of them and the unyielding iron around their neck. And then there's the sleep deprivation. Sleep was a luxury that became nearly impossible. A person might drift off for a few seconds, only to be violently jerked awake as their body slumped and the collar tightened its grip. This cycle of exhaustion and abrupt, painful awakenings would repeat endlessly, blurring the line between consciousness and a nightmare state. The psychological toll of this was immense, leading to hallucinations, and a complete breakdown of mental faculties. It was a slow, torturous descent into madness, all while standing in one spot. This punishment, known as the standing collar, or simply a form of public shaming and endurance torture, was often carried out in public spaces. The victim was not only subjected to physical torment, but also to the scorn and ridicule of passers-by. They were stripped of their dignity, made an example of for all to see. The humiliation was as much a part of the punishment as the physical pain. Food and water were often withheld or given sparingly, adding dehydration and starvation to the list of torments. The sheer simplicity of the device is what makes it so chilling. It didn't require complex mechanisms or elaborate setups, just a collar, a chain, and a wall. It preyed on the most basic human needs. The need to rest, to sit, to lie down. By denying these simple comforts, it inflicted a level of suffering that is difficult for us to comprehend today. It is a stark reminder of the cruelty humans are capable of and the dark ingenuity that can be applied to punishment. This wasn't about justice. It was about breaking a person's. Have you ever wondered what makes certain historical interrogation methods so notoriously terrifying? It's not always about inflicting physical pain. Sometimes, the most brutal attacks are the ones aimed directly at the mind. Today, we're delving into one of the most infamous techniques ever devised: water torture. It's a method that weaponizes one of our most basic survival instincts against us. Contrary to what you might see in movies, the primary goal wasn't just to cause physical harm. The real target was a person's psychological resilience. The setup was deceptively simple. A person would be restrained, often tilted backwards, with their face covered by a cloth. Then, water would be poured over their face, saturating the cloth and restricting their ability to breathe. Imagine the sensation. You're completely helpless, unable to move up. With every pour of water, your airways are blocked. You can't inhale. The natural, automatic process of breathing suddenly becomes a desperate struggle. Your lungs burn, your heart pounds in your chest, and an overwhelming, primal sense of panic begins to take over. You try to gasp for air, but all you get is more water. This creates a terrifyingly convincing illusion of drowning. This is where the psychological attack truly begins. The experience is designed to induce a state of absolute terror. Your brain, convinced that death is imminent, floods your system with adrenaline. The fight-or-flight response kicks into overdrive, but there's no way to fight and no way to flee. You are trapped in a cycle of near suffocation, followed by a brief moment of relief, only for the process to start all over again. The torment isn't in the water itself, but in the repeated, controlled suffocation. Each time the water is poured, the victim is brought to the very edge of their breaking point. The body's involuntary reflexes go wild. You might thrash, choke, and gag, but it's all useless against your restraints. This feeling of complete powerlessness is profoundly demoralizing. It's an assault on your will to resist, designed to shatter your composure and make you feel utterly vulnerable. The interrogators who used this method were masters of psychological manipulation. They understood that the anticipation was just as powerful as the act itself. The sound of water being poured, the feeling of the wet cloth on your face, these became triggers for intense fear. The pauses between each dousing were not moments of respite, but periods of agonizing dread, where you knew what was coming next. This constant state of high alert is mentally exhausting. Over time, this relentless cycle of panic and desperation breaks down a person's mental defenses. The distinction between the real threat and the perceived threat blurs. The mind can only endure so much before it seeks any possible escape. This is the ultimate goal of the torturer: to create a psychological state where the victim is willing to do or say anything just to make it stop. It's a chilling reminder that the human mind can be both incredibly resilient and terrifyingly fragile. The real weapon wasn't the water. It was the panic it induced. This method exploited the body's most fundamental need for air to turn a person's own mind against them, demonstrating a dark and calculated understanding of human psychology. It is a grim chapter in history that highlights how the fear of death can be a more potent tool of coercion than any physical injury. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into a dark piece of history. If you found this exploration of psychology and history interesting, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more content that makes you think. We'll see you in the next one.